It's just a rollicking great story.
It's a classic epic story.
It's about love, passion, anger, and lots of men fighting.
It's a tremendous, big, scary monster of a roller coaster ride story, and I love them. So, you know, as long as we can hang on and they don't fall off, we'll be fine.
It takes us to the extremes of what it is to be a human being.
I don't know if many people have actually read the whole of the Iliad, but it's quite long, and it will take you a few days of your life, a very, very nourishing few days of your life.
The Iliad is a story of set during the war between the Greeks and the Trojans, and really it centres around the character of Achilles and Agamemnon. And you know, Achilles and Agamemnon have an argument which gets blown out of all proportion. Achilles refuses to continue with the fighting, continue with the war, and because he's the greatest fighter there is, the Greeks have, he really puts the Greeks' campaign at risk.
We need to go back to the Greeks, because the Greeks were the first people who really engaged with the big questions of humanity about war, God, relationships, love, anger. And we go back to the Greeks because they were the first ones who talked about it.
It's the greatest war story ever told, but it's also a story about how to end wars.
So what Chris is masterful at is distilling a story into something very concise, but at the same time creating richness of it, so that there's always 3 or 4 things happening in scenes.
How do we deal with our anger? You know, can we forgive each other?
I think for me, the Iliad, it's interesting at the moment, there's quite a lot of productions from the Greeks, and there's been a number of Iliads and Odysseys happening, and I think society drifts towards them when it realises something is fundamentally wrong and needs addressing or needs rethinking.
We don't know how to respond to the crisis in Syria. You know, we don't know how to respond to that. We don't know how to respond to the migrants. You know, we're finding all of that very difficult and out of control, and we know that nobody's in control of that. That's the main thing. It's not like we think the government will sort all this out. We know they won't. That's the thing about the Iliad. I think it's people who are powerless in the face of a huge war, a huge conflict that none of them wants anymore.
I know exactly.
You're not feeling So it goes. See his head in battle drooping like a poppy in the rain. See his head in battle drooping, the final day of spring campaign.
Claire Mackenzie is doing the composition for this, and we've talked a lot about how that might work. The music is about humanity, and there's going to be voices. Voices are at the centre of it. I just wanted to keep it human. I want people to see human beings on stage in crisis and with death, threatened by death and driven by love. And so I wanted to be able to see them, and the music will be about supporting the humanity of that and hopefully getting a balance between maybe that and creating a slight otherness about it. And again, like the costume, like the set, reminding of us, creating a kind of bridge between then and now.
I think on the second or third day of rehearsals, we went over to the workshop, the whole cast and director and myself, and to see the set. And I mean, we're all just. It's wonderful to see something like that. You know, it's so epic, the set, and the actors were just delighted. You know, that it helps to tell the story. This is a huge epic tale. You know, but within it we can play the personal, the small personal stories.
There's a kind of idea at the beginning that these are actually refugees and they ended up living in this derelict site or ancient ruin, which is all very relevant to today. And that there's televisions and modern things as part of the setting. Because I saw all these buildings being put up really quickly on Leith Walk, that kind of inspired me to make this structure, and it's like a giant mechano kit, but it should feel like the modern is growing out of the old, so the pillars are surrounding these girders, but they're also growing out of it. Where the pillars are, the statues stand in front of them, looking over it all, looking after everybody. This is the very back wall of the set for the Iliad. It is corrugated metal, although you might think it's corrugated metal, but it is actually plastic, painted to look like corrugated metal, which the fantastic scenic artists here at the workshop have done a brilliant job on it. These are the tops of the pillars, and these names are actually the names of all the people that die in the Iliad. They won't all be on there because there's about 8 pages worth of names.
The script refers a lot to the weapons they used, and you couldn't take it away from the fact that it was set in ancient Greece with gods and all these fantastic characters, but it was also very contemporary.
When I was working with Megan was working through costume, and we were thinking about, well, how do we create a kind of hybrid world here? The thing that we found alienating, and Megan said, the thing is skirts. You've got men in skirts on stage. Not that I have any problem with men in skirts, but there's something about it alienates because the Greeks wore skirts. And it just made you feel that it was long ago, that's all.
The play starts off with the characters as refugees all over the world now, contemporary. And then to get them back to telling the story of the sort of ancient story of the Iliad, they decided that they would put on their costumes to tell the story. So they would keep contemporary on as their base costume, and then they would put on the armour. The men would put on the armour, and the women would put on the Greek and the Trojan clothing. And so all the characters put the clothes on top of what they're wearing before. So they're then playing this character, and they put on a robe or a gown on top of their trousers or on top of their contemporary clothes. And then the gods, we wanted them to be very different from a completely different world, and they're meddling with all the warriors, all the characters, and they're sort of having a life of leisure, really, as they're sort of swanning around, sort of just meddling with all this awful, this atrocious war. And so we decided, Mark and I had a long conversation on how we were going to do that, and we decided that we'd put them in beachwear, like they were constantly on holiday, having their cocktails, sort of just sort of lounging around and then meddling with this war. So the gods are all wearing sort of gold bikinis and gold swimming costumes. I work really closely with Caitlin, who's the costume supervisor, who is just extraordinary as well. They make everything happen, they're effortlessly.
Well, I think the Lyceum's fantastic to work for, and we're so lucky to have theatres that still have workshops, because they're getting few and far between. And it's a fantastic workshop at the Lyceum. There's loads of really talented people here, and they help make my ideas real.
I'm very interested in other people's creativity. I'm very interested in somebody's idea that cuts across mine but is better than mine or more unusual. So I suppose what I'm looking forward to in the rehearsal process is hopefully the arrival of the unpredictable on a daily basis, of the unforeseen, that make everybody in the room feel alert.
Really, my job is not to say very much. It's just, it provides reassurance, I think, to people that you know, if there is doubt about where the story is going, then they've got somebody to turn to.
There's 13 first dates happening in that room, and none of us quite know how we're going to behave with each other. So, and that's thrilling. It's really exciting, and they're all here and gathered around something and passionate about it being good. You know, what could be bad about that?
It's wonderful. It's a wonderful piece of work.
It's sex, gods, and war, not necessarily in that order.